Alright guys, in this video I'm going to cover the first actual FMC technique, which is block building. I'm also going to touch a bit on modifying your block solutions and edge orientation. Edge orientation's a tiny bit tricky, so I'm not going to go into too much depth about that. I'm just going to give you the idea of what to do with that. So yeah, for now I'm just going to talk about block building. The end goal with block building a lot of the time, again with FMC you shouldn't be doing the same thing over and over, but this is usually a good point to get at, is F12 minus 1. So what that looks like is that's just F12 all done, except the last slot isn't solved. And then from here, what you would do is you'd use all the FMC techniques that I'll be teaching later on, like insertions and stuff like that. So for actual block building, there's a few ways you can start out. I'm not going to cover every single way of starting out an FMC solve because there'd just be too many. You've just got to explore and figure these out on your own. But I'll cover the main ones. First one is starting out with a Petrus block, so it's Petrus style block building. Anyone who knows the Petrus method will already know what I'm talking about. So you start off with a 2x2x2 block, like that. And then from here you go to a 2x2x3. So something like that. And then after this, instead of doing edge orientation like you would in the Petrus method, what you'd want to do is just build the F12 minus 1. I mean, you could do edge orientation. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but just for what I'm trying to explain here, I'm just explaining getting to F12 minus 1. So you'd build a square like that. And then from here you've got your last slot, last layer, or F12 minus 1. So that's one way of getting to F12 minus 1. Another way that you might sometimes want to do is it's sort of like Roux, but after the first step it's not like Roux at all. So what you do is you make the 1x2x3 block. So you start out with a 1x2x2, and then from here you can do that, and then you've got 1x2x3. And then after that you make the 2x2x3 by filling in the two edges that go in the bottom layer, like that. And then from here it's the same as before, you build another square to go to F12 minus 1, or you could do EO, like I mentioned before. Actually, you could do EO at pretty much any point in the solution. There isn't really a fixed point where EO has to be done or can be done. So yeah, that's how you can get to F12 minus 1 using that. And then the last one I'll just mention, it's not really something I can teach too much about because it is pretty abstract. What you do is, so it's sort of like a 2x2x2, except it's instead just a 2x2x1. And what you end up doing is you just build a whole bunch of these, so like 3 or 4, and then you just connect them all together and you get most of an F12 minus 1, or you'll already get an F12 minus 1. So that's pretty much the idea. Again, there's too many ideas I could just throw at you, but what I really want to just emphasize on is usually you just want to go for the F12 minus 1, and maybe orient some edges along the way. So now that's a good segue into my next point, which is edge orientation. So I can't really talk too much about this because it is kind of a tricky thing to understand. But basically, if an edge on a cube can be solved with R, U, L, D, F2 or B2 moves, then the edge is oriented. So I've just scrambled this in a way where all the edges are oriented. Every single edge can be solved with R and U moves, and along with L and D moves. And then for F and B moves, only if they're double triggers, so double F and double B. That's how you know if an edge is oriented, and it's something good to check out because of what I'm going to cover in a later video, which is called skeletons and building skeletons, which is usually what you'll do after F12 minus 1. So now with that being said, I'm going to talk about the last thing, which is modifying solutions, or knowing that you can build stuff differently to give different cases. So the first one is, I'll just talk about building stuff differently. That's not a good example. Okay, like this. So you shouldn't be building crosses or anything in FMC, but this is just for demonstration purposes. So you've got a pair here, and you can insert it with 3 moves using R, U prime, R prime. But that's not the only way you can insert this pair. What you can also do is you can do a U move and swing this up, and then do a U2. And what that might do is that might leave you with a better continuation for the rest of the block building. And the continuation of an FMC solve is just as important as how efficient your blocks are. So doing RU prime R prime is 3 moves, but doing U, RU to R prime is 4 moves. And you might think, that's not as efficient, so why would I do that? Well, that's the thing, you might get better continuation, which is just as important. And another way you can insert this is you can do sledgehammer, which is R prime, F, R, F prime. There's countless ways you can insert a pair like this. I'm not going to cover every single one. And this doesn't just apply to pairs, this just applies to like pretty much any block you build, or any algorithm. There's always a different way you can do it, and some ways are more advantageous than others. And then the next thing I'm going to talk about, the last thing in this video, is modifying your solution. And the way that works is you pretty much just insert single moves, like, I don't know, a B move or an L move. Anything that doesn't affect the blocks you've built or are already building. So in this case, all the pieces for the 2x2x2 block are just over here. So doing L moves and B moves doesn't do anything to this, so you can still solve it with 4 moves. So maybe doing any of those insertions that I just showed you doesn't leave a better continuation. So maybe what you want to do instead is insert a B move before it, and then insert the pair in any given way, and then maybe that'll give you better blocks to go along with. So that's pretty much the idea with block building. There's a lot of different ways you can build blocks, and there's a lot of different ways you can solve blocks, but a lot of the time the end goal is just to get an F12-1, and you'll see why in my next videos. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in those next videos.